is of a huge concern because, like metabolic issues, hormonal dysfunction, which were a part of the older generation or plus 40, we are seeing much earlier. So, in a certain way, I always say we're getting adult diseases in childhood. We're seeing absolutely lean, skinny girls who are coming with the cysts and having hormonal problems, infertility, or frequent miscarriages. Both, right? So if anyone comes with that, our antennas are up. Gynecologist had told her, you need to operate. And she said, no, I want to have a baby. She said, you can't have a. She came to me in distress that, is there something that one can do? And Pooja, you will be surprised that within 2 months, her pain was reduced to 1/2. And by the end of 3 months, she was pain-free. And within a few months, she conceived. Inflammation. I have this one patient of mine who came to me. She was under gynecological treatment for PCOS.
Hi, welcome to our Women Wellness First podcast. Today we have a renowned nutritionist, Ms. Ishi Khosla, with us, who has been in practice for 40 years now. And there is a wealth of information that we can learn from her because the more you are into this practice, the more clients you deal with, the more experience you get. And the nuances that you get about nutrition is through the client cases that you go through. So the more experience you have, the better it is because that's where the real information comes in. So I was very keen to have Ishi ma'am on my podcast because I really wanted to share the information that she has with my client on women health and other aspects of nutrition as well. So I'm very, very delighted to have Ishi ma'am on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ija.
Thank you, Ishi. Thank you so much for coming, ma'am. Like I said in the introduction, that you've been in this business for the longest time and you're very senior and you have dealt with, thousands of clients, I'm sure. You've been on forums, you do corporate training, you are on social media. You also, I've seen a lot of your interviews on NDTV and things like that. So yeah, you're very, very respected in this field. So I'm very glad to have you. But I also want to know, that's why I wanted to know that, 35 years of practice. So my first question is that what are the things that you have seen as a big change in this field or in the kind of clients that you're seeing or in the kind of problems that you're seeing in clients now, which probably were non-existent maybe when you started off. So especially in women health, is there a big change that you see?
Oh, yes. Very big shift. And it's a shift which is of a huge concern because like metabolic issues, hormonal dysfunction, which were a part of the older generation or plus 40, we are seeing much earlier. So in a certain way, I always say we're getting adult diseases in childhood and childhood diseases in adults. Like, for instance, I won't call it a disease, but acne for that matter. Yeah, acne was something which was associated with hormonal imbalance in children at a certain age, puberty to adolescence. And that was like considered normal, which is really not actually to be, say, normalized, but it was there and we never thought too much about it. Yeah. But today we're getting women at 50s, 60s, 65s getting acne.
Wow.
And the other way around, even if you look at, say, polycystic ovaries,
Yes.
that was really not something which, even in our education, we studied about. They were not a part of a curriculum. And we said, okay, well, maybe these women are obese or sedentary and eating unhealthy, and therefore it is associated with these cysts, and we need to make them lose weight, and we need to give them a healthy diet to fix this. But today we are seeing absolutely lean, skinny girls who are coming with the cysts and having hormonal problems. So the entire shift, breast cancer for that matter, it was supposed to be the risk factors were very, very, that obesity or sedentary women again and women who had not had children or had not breastfed, etc. But none of those things seemingly are fitting in. Today we have under 20s getting diagnosed. And I have a patient who was just all of early 20s and with lumps, and it's going up to even 80s. Right. An 80 or I was just talking to one of our colleagues who's an ultrasound mammography expert. And he said that, it was an 80 plus woman with, so it's a complete change in the way we are experiencing health and ill health rather. And the conventional risk factors are not adding up. And even if you say fatty liver, it's always been associated with something which is extra weight on your belly, and or you're just obese in general. But I have a patient who's all of 38 kilos and she has grade 3 fatty liver. Is so seriously underweight. So, the entire spectrum, metabolic disease to hormonal issues and to malnutrition to autoimmunity, everything put together is in a state of crisis.
Right. So what would you say about it? Like what could be the key reasons why we are having such a high number of these issues?
I think these are really lifestyle issues.
Right.
But when I say lifestyle, it almost seems like I take ownership of myself and my lifestyle and blame it on myself. But the fact is that it reads a little different. Okay. What we are seeing as a shift in the patterns of eating are probably not entirely our fault.
Okay.
An ecosystem has changed. Food has become industrialized. But what is it that is causing this grave acceleration in numbers? Is can be rooted down to the change in our ecosystem with respect to certain kinds of foods and agricultural practices. And that has affected our bodies inside. So while biology doesn't change, but the physiology and the gut has changed.
Right.
Our bodies have changed.
Okay.
So the biology is the same, but if the body is different, it's making a big difference. And to be more specific, what I find is that besides having extra, higher intake of ultra-processed foods, which includes sugar and packed foods and preservatives and pesticides, the bigger change is in the grain. In the modern wheat, which happened for a good reason, to feed the world, to feed people who were dying with famine. And so the high-yielding varieties of wheat were introduced in the 1960s. It's called PL 480. And while it did feed people, but safety studies lacking seemed to be the reason that it seems like the body was not happy with it. It has evoked immune responses. It is an immunogenic grain in itself. I mean, wheat allergy is known to provoke the immune system in people who are sensitive to it. But today it is provoking people in ways which was not known earlier. And it was introduced in the 60s. And I think after 20 years, we began to see, creeping up. We saw diseases like diabetes creeping up. We saw thyroid problems, obesity, heart disease, all of them gradually increasing. And I think all the understanding which has happened in the last so many years with medical professionals, practicing more aggressive medicine, and the pharma being much more out there. The nutrition quotient is being much more. We are understanding nutrition facts much more. Everything has been much more advanced in these last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
But the rates of diseases has not stalled, rather. It has accelerated.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give you stats here, but things which should not have been there at all. For instance, we're talking about women here, but if you just look at children's disease, autism, it begins with women with the child in the home, so from pregnancy onwards, and early experiences in pregnancy and even pre-pregnancy health is important. So those stats are like extremely disturbing.
Yeah.
1 in 10,000 was 20 years ago. If I talk about autism, 1 in 10,000, and today we are looking at 1 in 49 and maybe even lower.
Wow, it's like
crazy. Something is seriously wrong.
Yeah.
And then we understand that, okay, if it is wheat, what has happened? It has changed the microbiome.
Yes.
And the understanding of the gut today gives us all the answers. If there is something that is foreign to the body and you're eating it, it's going to impact the diversity of your microbiome. And the microbiome is really where health or ill health is decided or defined.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest shift.
That's probably.
And the other contributing factors are always there, whether it's sleep disturbances, whether it's stress, and alcohol, and all of these things. They have definitely contributed.
Yeah.
Sedentary habits. But today, I think even women and men who are exercising, who are out right there on their treadmills, doing their bodybuilding, just dropping dead. Some of them are just not. There are no, like I said, the conventional risk factors are not adding up.
Yes.
And if I have to summarize this answer, it's about a shift in the gut microbiome leading to, a leaky gut leading to inflammation. So that trajectory is sort of where it all kind of makes sense. Right. Yeah.
Right. So obviously there are things that you have seen from the start of your practice to now, how, there is a big change in what the kind of clients that are coming through your door. But what are the basic principles that still remain the same in terms of, eating what you need to eat and stuff like that? So what are the basic, probably, guidelines that you've always been giving to all your clients, which remains kind of consistent throughout?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some things which don't add up even now, if I'm giving you the other part of your answer, which is contrary, that if you always thought calories mattered, they do, but that is only one part of it.
Right.
So what hasn't changed is eating healthy, eating clean, avoiding processed food and eating out as much as possible, which is really not happening. But yes, hopefully the eateries and the food services must get into healthier eating. And people are not going to stop eating out. That's a form of entertainment. But certainly cleaner food should be available outside. But coming back to your answer, I think eating on time, eating less.
Yeah.
So eating early, eating till you're 80% full, and managing your weight, managing your waist, and pretty much all of that. But I don't definitely talk about calories in people, because I know that once you regulate your gut function, that means you reset your gut, the food regulation bit happens on its own.
Okay. Yeah.
When your breakup of fats and proteins and carbohydrates becomes all right, not with maths, but with just the way we explain things to people, we see a shift in food regulation. And when I say that, I really mean how much people are eating and how they're eating, the hunger, the cravings, and all the obsession with food, the whole attitude towards food changes.
Right.
And that shift between eating to live and live to eat happens. People who have lived to eat begin to say the opposite.
Okay.
So it almost is like an auto-regulation. Right. So we don't stress on that, but these are the basics. And sleep enough, exercise enough, do more cardio. And a few more things have been added. We are more focused on weights today, doing resistance exercises for preserving our muscle mass. So we're far more intelligent in terms of what we are telling our patients and what we are telling the public. But, and like I said, the awareness is much more, but the basics still
remain
the same.
Yeah.
However, when it comes to guidelines, for instance, it was always like eat whole grains. That should be 60% of your calories, and the carbohydrates should be 60%. And that shift has not happen. I mean, we've gone the other way around. Right. To make that as a smaller percentage of your food, that particularly grains, and choose your grains wisely. The grains which worked for us are not working for us now.
So we talk about grains, then like we're talking about wheat, or we're talking about rice, we're talking about millets, like
Well, when we talk about grains, here I'm referring to inflammatory grains, but
Okay.
if I refer to grains in general, I have to address both, all kinds of grains, which means understanding inflammation. So, inflammatory grains and insulin issues. So, grains which, for instance, if I say remove, say, corn or wheat or oats, etc., um, that does not equal increasing, say, rice and millets, even though millets and rice may be all right and healthy and non-inflammatory, but that does is not the obvious thing. So you can go horribly wrong. And a diet which has elimination of certain grains can be a very skewed diet if you overdo the other grains. So the message has to be in balance.
Okay.
And controlling the portions of these grains for sure.
Okay.
The 3 meal concept of having 2 chapatis, that, the so-called balanced diet, which was like a blanket and band-aid treatment for everybody who went to a dietitian, that a balanced diet is about having 2 chapatis in the morning and 2 at lunch with dal and sabzi and 2 at dinner with dal and sabzi and having some biscuits or, whatever in between or some chanas. That doesn't seem to add up to, for most people, it doesn't work.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It in fact goes back to a quote which I'm reminded of while we speak, that in one of the ancient sayings, I'm going to repeat it in Hindi, the Ek Kal Bhoji is a yogi. That means somebody who eats once is a yogi. Dvi Kal Bhoji is a bhogi. And Tri Kal Bhoji is a rogi.
Yeah.
Eating 3 times is associated to illness.
Yeah.
So I think this resonates very well with what I just said, that we don't have to have that so-called balanced diet. It all depends on who you are and your requirements. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So, Ishi ma'am, like most of my clients that I deal with are, dealing with hormonal issues. So that's because that's a niche that I focused on because I had fertility issues. So I'm trying to help other women who have similar sort of issues. So tell me a little bit more about your experience with clients who are dealing with fertility issues and how do you approach it? What's your approach for that?
Okay. So, well, all I'll say is that one of the red flags for a gut issue or a gluten sensitivity is infertility or frequent miscarriages.
No, right.
So if anyone comes with that, our antennas are up. So as a matter of fact, one of the celiac patients, so you don't have to have celiac disease to have gluten sensitivity. So let me make that very clear. And so this particular lady was celiac and she was an adult in her early 50s. And because of her tummy issues, which were unresolved, tall woman, very active, no other risk factors. But when she came to me with her tummy issues, which she had been dealing with since she was a kid,
Right.
and she was only being given band-aid treatment like antibiotics, and then she would be fine, and then another few months. So literally every year she would have 3 or 4 courses of antibiotics, and that was a norm for her. She had 2 boys, and but before that she had multiple miscarriages. Okay, about 4 or 5 miscarriages. And when she came to me with this, I said, look, you need to get yourself checked for sensitivity. And, we did a battery of tests and we found that she had celiac disease. So, and she had full-blown celiac disease. Now, the other thing that she always had was bone issues. She had like osteoporosis, beginning of osteoporosis, and but her hemoglobin was fine. She was a tall woman. There was no growth failure, nothing, none of those typical signs. So there are no typical signs. You can have atypical celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. And then the entire thing, you can, join the dots. Why she was suffering, why she didn't conceive for so long, and why she had with miscarriages. You can just absolutely by default join the dots. She came to me for a tummy problem and we were able to see everything that was happening to her with, through her tummy.
Wow.
And so then she went to the gastroenterologist who did an endoscopic biopsy and confirmed the diagnosis. So yeah, we are seeing these kind of pictures all the time.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, I had a woman who came to me at the age of, I think she was 34, 35, and had already been through infertility treatment. And the third time her IVF was planned, that's the time when she came to me and she said, look, I have come for weight loss. Because, generally the public and the treating professionals do not associate this condition with gut or food sensitivities. It's just not done. So that patient will never come to me for this. But she came to me because all these treatments were making her obese.
Yeah.
And then that became a red flag for conception the third time.
Right.
The gynae said, look, please lose some weight. Okay, we have only one more window.
Okay.
And I looked at her file and I said, look, I am not worried about your weight. I'm more worried about your fertility. And I know your problem. She had low hemoglobin and she had digestive issues. And again, let me just add here that you don't have to have digestive issues to have a gut problem. Okay. Yeah, you don't have to have any of that. So, simply put, you can have symptoms outside the gut. You can have it on your skin, or you can have it in your hormones. You can have it then head to toe, inside out. So I said, look, I will first try and ensure that your third attempt of IVF becomes successful, and for that you will have to follow the diet of elimination, and which means certain grains will be out, and we're going to supplement, and we're going to work on your gut to restore the balance. She said, okay. And so she followed the diet, and after about 3 months of completion of the diet, her round of IVF was planned, and it was successful.
Wow.
So, of course, she was very happy. And I said, look, now that you have conceived, don't think that, it's all over, because it can again happen that you can miscarry. So please be extremely mindful of what you're eating during your pregnancy. And I'd like to monitor you through this. So she agreed, because I know what's going on. I mean, she has a terrible gut, and, anything. The growth retardation can be one of the symptoms. You can have children who can have problems later. I mean, this girl, particularly, I think on the third trimester. Oh, first of all, let me tell you that she was anemic to another level. She was 7, 8, 9. That was her hemoglobin. On supplement, she would manage 9, and otherwise it was 7 or 8. And because of her digestive issues, she came and told me that my gynecologist has prescribed iron, which is normally done as a routine, and folic acid, but I cannot tolerate iron. I have a terrible gut. It constipates me, creates acidity, so I'm not going to have iron. I said, look, if you follow my diet, let's see how much more you start absorbing. And although with anemia, with the pregnancy, there is anemia, physiological. So guess what? The third trimester, she was, the blood work was done, and hemoglobin was 12.5.
Wow.
With 0 supplement.
Wow.
Carrying twins.
Wow.
That is where you understand the science. And so, like I said, now you can join the dots completely. Her digestive issues, her infertility, her history of miscarriages, her own short stature. She was a very short lady, very, very shy. And her anemia, everything was linked to organic.
Yeah.
And then the gynecologist, of course, told her, please continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because we don't see this without supplements.
Yeah. Because absorption is like taking the supplement is one thing, but absorption is completely different thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. This is amazing.
Yeah. So not only do you conceive, you get your gut back, and she had absolutely healthy pregnancy, no gestational diabetes. There was a very strong family history of diabetes and blood pressure. And, being a 35-year-old pregnant woman, you were at risk for developing it. And she was very short. So it was like, but nothing happened. And those whites are absolutely fine. Touch wood and all this. They've been almost 10 years now.
Wow. It's amazing.
So we see the connections, and many women come for weight loss to conceive. Yeah, and they just conceive within 2, because the diets that we put them on have a, kind of grain that we give for better insulin response. So we put them more on lentils and pulses, etc. And the And suddenly, after 2 months, they stop coming because they've conceived.
Yes.
So we see that all the time.
Yeah.
And whether it's this or we see polycystic ovaries, because there is also one of the things which is, leading to.
Because this is something that I have observed, that when I started out, so 10 years back, I was seeing more people with PCOS, and now it's more endometriosis. So in the last 5 years itself, I see that people are suffering from more endometriosis as much as we.
I was just thinking that, we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
I have this case of, I don't like to call them cases, but yes, this young woman who had one child and was trying to conceive for the second one, but she developed severe endometriosis, and grade 3 or grade 4. It was like so bad that the whole household, it was a joint family, used to plan their activities around her period.
Yeah.
Because she used to be laden for 15 days in bed. Painkillers didn't work. She used to have IV medication.
Gosh.
It was so bad. And of course, the gynecologist had told her, we need to operate you.
Yeah.
And she said, no, I want to have a baby. She said, you can't have a baby. So it was like she came to me in distress that, is there something that one can do? And Pooja, you will be surprised that within 2 months, her pain was reduced to 1/2, and by the end of 3 months, she was pain-free.
Wow.
And within a few months, she conceived and she had a baby, and all is well, and she follows the diet to the T.
Yeah.
Because it's a life changer. Imagine a woman who is in bed with IV medication for endometriosis.
So this is, you would put them off gluten, or is it?
The inflammatory triggers, as we call them, include wheat, include corn, include soya, and it includes oats as well.
Oats has a very selected grain. Wow. So oats is something which is like.
So they're absolutely fine, Pooja. There's nothing wrong with corn or soy or oats. It's just the body, like I said.
Yes.
The body inside has changed. So if I have to give you a one-line explanation, it's that we have lost tolerance to certain things for no fault of ours.
Right.
So therefore, like I said, I always tell my patients, it's not your fault. I tell my audiences, it's not your fault, because everyone is ridden with guilt. And, eating with fear all the time and making yourself, feeling guilty about not exercising enough, not being able to diet, I'm eating too much sugar, all these kind of
beating yourself
all the time.
Yeah, and I think we are doing more in this generation as compared to what our elders did for their health. We are more health conscious, and yet we are
feeling like failure. Yes.
Yeah.
And so some of them are eating as frugally as 800 calories.
Yes.
And they're exercising, and some of them are not losing, and some of them are literally gaining weight with inflammation.
Yeah.
So the beauty is that today we understand things far more than before.
Yeah.
And the science of the gut is truly empowering and transformational.
Yeah. True. Again, you mentioned something like with PCOS that you have girls who are very lean and they still have PCOS. So what are the underlying reasons for people who are actually quite lean? They do not fit into that typical PCOS profile, and yet they have all the PCOS symptoms. And what's the sort of a trend that you see in them? Like, what is the main reason why?
Inflammation. I have this one patient of mine who came to me. She was under gynecological treatment for PCOS. And of course, she had a thyroid nodule. And she was being given the pill for polycystic ovaries. And yet, over 3 years of treatment, was not being able to get rid of him. Ultrasounds continued to have cysts. And she was being guided by the doctors for the diet being high protein. So tons and tons of dairy were going in. She's a vegetarian. So paneer twice a day, and, protein powders, etc., etc. And neither was the weight going down, neither was the cysts disappearing. And Pooja, I have to tell you this, that it was not even a month of the diet. It was just about 25 days. And she got an ultrasound done after the diet, and hypnosis.
Cyst was gone.
Hypnosis. So it was just inflammation and shift in microbiome.
Right.
And the beauty is that even the thyroid nodule, when she went for her thyroid checkup, they were palpable. It wasn't there, and then they did a test, a scan, and there was nothing there. So, it just disappeared. So, how compelling is that?
Yes. Yeah. It's very compelling. Yeah.
Do we see this evidence every single day?
Yeah.
And I think since we're talking about women, but it's not restricted to women, that mental health issues have become very serious, much more than they were ever known to be.
Yeah.
So,
And that's again related to gut as well, right? Like the whole gut-brain axis.
that's what Radhika.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the other reasons that you're seeing a lot of like autism that you mentioned.
Yes.
All that, like, your stunted growth and things like that.
Dysuria, intrauterine growth retardation.
Yeah.
Among people who are like they own industries, and there's no dearth of any kind of food.
Yeah.
There's on the other side excess, and the babies are not growing. They're needing to, abort yet in pregnancies. And I see the other side. I've seen a case where she was, I think, I don't remember her age, but she was 9 months pregnant. She had only 3 weeks for delivery, and the baby was less than a kg. Okay. So, and of course, they were trying with all the supplements that the gynae was giving. When she came to me, that was the time we had 3 weeks to intervene. And I said, look, I think I know what's going on, but I don't have time for you to experiment. You'll have to be absolutely faithful to the diet.
Yeah.
And Pooja, she delivered at 2.3 kgs.
Wow. So within 3 weeks, the baby started putting on. So the baby was basically rejecting the gluten, or
there was inflammation because of gluten, and there was malabsorption.
Right.
So if
you remove the inflammatory diet, then things starts to get back in balance. Yeah. Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, and I talk about mental health. These people who are having a dysbiosis or a bad gut can also manifest in these mental health issues, for which usually, because that's the way forward, you go to a professional and you're given medication, and that itself creates a dysbiosis, and you start becoming obese and overweight. So it compounds the problem.
Yeah, absolutely not. Because it just kind of destroys your microbiome, right? The moment you start taking these strong steroids or antibiotics or, heavy
or antidepressants, anything,
it just destroys your gut. And then you get into that vicious cycle and because your gut is weak and your mental health gets affected.
Yeah. So that vicious cycle, and some of them have actually lost weight and they're feeling very good, and suddenly they go back to. So the one thing which everyone needs to know is there is no permanency as far as diet is concerned. There is no permanency as far as exercise is concerned. You have to be on them on a regular basis, and they work only till you do them.
Right.
So it's not a goalpost that I ran and I did that, I touched it and I came back and I won the first prize and I'm done for life. I have that record.
Yeah.
It is an everyday affair.
Absolutely.
And so these women who go back to their eating patterns, then they regain the weight and they get it more than before. Yes, never because we've lost muscle. And then, the vicious cycle starts that, okay, again, I'm in this, and then you get into mental health issues, and then the depression compounds, and then it's an unending, unresolved problem for life.
Yeah. So tell me about how you have experimented with your diet, because have you given up gluten, and how does gluten works for you or not? How have you changed your diet over a period of time?
First, let me tell you, I was an obese child.
Acha.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't an obese baby. I wasn't born big, but then I think I developed a great love for food instinctively. And my mother says she was ready to eat all the time.
Okay.
It was literally like being a bottomless pit. I was like hungry after breakfast. I was hungry after lunch, and I could eat anyone. I do recall that.
Okay.
And to the extent that I went to a pediatrician at about almost 2 years because I wasn't walking. And they said, just make her lose weight. She's normal. So yeah, and I think serious weight loss happened from my side when I was in class 9th.
Okay.
And I think I just intuitively and did a little bit of calorie counting, but I think gave up eating meals and dinners, and I think I must have lost weight. But that's what triggered the spark in me to do nutrition rather than medicine.
Wow. Okay.
So, but till from then up until 45, 49 years of age, I managed my food fairly well and remained quite, in control of my weight. But not 100% my health. I developed a thyroid problem, and I used to have bad skin and hair, but those things, we lived with.
Yeah.
But then came the menopause time, and that's when I realized that my own science, my own tools in the toolbox, which I use for my patients every day, were not working for me.
Wow.
And I began to develop a belly. I began to develop some sleeplessness, and I also developed some swelling in my ankle. And I said, hey, these are not my symptoms. I had a hot flash suddenly, and I said, this happened to others, not to me.
Yeah.
I didn't relate to it at all.
Right.
And I was up on the scale by 2 kilos, which was not budging. And I said, I'm brain fogged. So this is not me. I got my blood work done, everything. And seemed okay. But of course, my thyroid levels had crossed over to nothing very significant. But then I increased my medication and nothing was really resolving the problem. And I said, look, when I treat my patients, I do look at gluten as an issue. So why don't I put it on myself and try?
Okay.
And Pooja, it was magical. Literally over 2 weeks, my body just came back to what it used to be. And I said, thank God, because I couldn't imagine myself living with that bloat and the belly. And I was like an odd person. And I said, oh my God, yes. And every other symptom, whether it was my sleep or my skin, everything just came back.
Wow.
Over a few weeks. And
so is it because around that age when your hormones are changing, you're not able to adapt to the diet that you previously were having?
See, it's like this, Pooja, that we have the microbiome in the gut. We know there are about 30 trillion microbes in our gut, which control everything about our lives, including our hormones.
Yeah.
There is a bunch of, a set of them called estrobolome.
Yeah.
Which is going to determine the estrogen levels.
Yeah.
There is oxytocin. There are many others. Of course, the other mental health hormones, the happy hormones, they are all being regulated by the microbiome.
Correct.
And it's a bidirectional thing, that the hormones are regulated by the microbiome, and the microbiome also regulates the hormone. So in a woman's body, we are programmed to have hormonal upheavals.
Yeah.
Starting with the period, we have a monthly change in hormones during the cycle. And if you just pause and think, during PMS, which is dreaded by most people as much as menopause, what are the symptoms? That hormonal shift causes symptoms which include weight gain.
Yeah. Slight. Yes. Bloating, puffiness.
Water retention.
Yes.
Irritability.
Yeah.
Anxiety.
Yeah.
Sleep disturbances. Just this morning, this patient came and she said, I don't have sleep problems, but yes, before my period, I get sleep problems. And it gets okay.
Yeah.
So all of these things, sugar cravings.
Yeah.
Eating behavior changes. And general fatigue and everything just can. All of these 5 or 7 symptoms that we've talked about are a part of menopause, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. All of them.
Yeah. But the body in a period comes back to normal, the hormones reset, and the gut then therefore becomes okay. Also gut symptoms. In PMS, some people get constipated, some women, some of them
get diarrhea.
So there are gut shifts.
Yeah.
So the hormonal upheaval shifts something in the microbiome, which is actually being regulated by the microbiome.
Correct.
So, but we are able to deal with it on a monthly basis because you become normal.
Correct.
And then comes pregnancy. Again, upheaval. And according to the science of the gut and the microbiome, scientists have found that by the third trimester, the gut is undergoing changes for sure, negative changes. But by the third trimester, these hormones cause such a shift in the microbiome that the gut microbiome looks like an IBD, inflammatory bowel disease patient. That is a kind of state of the gut.
Okay. In the third trimester.
It's progress. It's progress. By the third, it's like that.
Okay.
And then comes your delivery and everything happens. So it's not going to just change in one, few, as you deliver and it's okay. And that's the time traditionally our diets were meant to be very, very pure and controlled, as, there was a lot of focus on ghee and eating the right kind of food. If you did not do that for the first 3-4 months, they said you can have problems later in life.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you see, if women who are sensitive to food, for certain grains and are eating normally, or you are going to get depression.
Yeah.
You are going to get some thyroid problems, autoimmune problems. All of these are rooted in the gut and pancreas. So if you join the dots, you can mean that, so you have to be very careful today because you have to address this shift in microbiome. And typically these things never bothered us, the grains, etc. They were so inherent. But now with the leaky gut and the modern grains, like I said, the modified grains are not doing any service to us. They are doing the opposite. And we are seeing the increase. Having said that, I'm going to use this opportunity to also add the fact that women who are reacting negatively to this modern grain are making antibodies against it, which is what causes the problems. Now, these antibodies against, say, wheat can transfer to the baby in the third trimester. They cross the placental barrier.
Okay.
And therefore, this child is already getting, before he's born, he's getting a disadvantage of getting antibodies. So there's inflammation. And therefore, you explain the early onset and the increase in the number of congenital, health conditions we are seeing today. And you're seeing type 1 diabetes, we are seeing thyroid problems early, we are seeing attention problems, ADHD, and autism, all rooted in the gut. Yeah, starting from the mother.
From the mother. Yeah.
And of course, there are other triggers as well. So that I'm not going to mention here. But yes, these dots can be joined beautifully now.
Yeah.
So in my case, I figured that this is happening, and then we went to I entered the perimenopause. I'm talking of the cycle from menstrual, pregnancy, perimenopause. Again, hormones shift,
right,
and gut problems appear. And so for me, for instance, at that time, I had developed a sensitivity to wheat. My gut was becoming leaky. I did not know.
Right.
And suddenly it had just, given me symptoms which I'd never had. And it wasn't responding. And so it was a message it was an alarm or a message to tell me that I need to take another look at my food.
Okay. So tell me, how did your diet shift then around the menopause when you went to?
Well, it was just because I was already on a controlled carbohydrate diet. I was doing everything else. I was having all my supplements. I was careful about everything. The only thing was a shift in grain. And I wasn't a great grain eater. Even then, I used to have very small portions, if at all. And I just stopped doing that. I just changed. And it just was magical.
Not there anymore.
Zero.
Wow. Okay.
And so since then, it's been so many years.
Wow. Amazing.
Those 15 years.
15 years, no grains.
No, none of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I restrict my grains in choices also. I limit my quantities as well. And I keep it to just rice and some quinoa and sometimes some millets, but only as a part of indulgence. They're not an integral part. I focus more on my proteins and vegetables and fats.
Right.
pretty much.
Okay. All right. Great. So, Ishi ma'am, you have this very nice concept of 5 Ps where you've kind of put everything together because सब लोग अलग-अलग तरह के questions पूछते हैं क्या करना चाहिए क्या नहीं करना चाहिए. So I think you found like a quick sort of a mini module with 5 Ps which actually incorporates most of your recommendations. So can you take us through that?
It was actually the need when I was writing my book. And said, everyone wants to say करना क्या है. हाँ ये सब तो ज्ञान तो दे दिया लेकिन how can I package this whole food, the world around? It has so many different aspects. You can't just make a magic bullet and put it in a formula and say कि अब ये इसको follow करो. लेकिन getting close to it, I tried to put it as making it as comprehensive and practical. So it came out as the 5 pillars to good health of starting with the first P, which was planning.
Okay.
The first P of planning really means that you can't take your diet for granted. You have to be mindful about what you're eating. You have to plan. You have to, therefore, every day, like you plan your clothes and your meetings and other things in life, you have to give it that importance.
Right.
Because I used to often have patients saying, oh, we couldn't help it, we were traveling. We couldn't help it because we were in a conference or we were socializing or we were, something or the other that we went from one meeting to the other. I said, no, if you did not plan, that's your problem. You must ensure that the right kind of food which you are going to eat is available for you. I was at the airport, but you can anticipate what's at the airport and thereby fill the gap. Add the thing which is missing or learn to pick up from these things. So, but दिमाग तो लगाना पड़ेगा ना. You have to think about it. You just can't say there was nothing else to eat.
Right.
So, and when it comes to planning, I also then add that plan your exercise time, plan your food according to your exercise time, plan your supplements as per your schedule. So, giving it thought. And then I also add a plan to the cereal, to the grain that you're eating. Since I believe that the grain change is the game change, your choice of grain, as well as your portion and your timing should also be a part of your planning calendar. Plan your peak hunger time. That's the second P. If peak hunger time is addressed, then you are no longer struggling. Okay? And Pooja, I don't know whether you see that, but I find that peak hunger time is usually between 4 and 7 for most people. They're horribly wrong. Some people like to eat a good breakfast or they're very much more hungry at lunch. But if I look at numbers, mostly the maximum is between 5 and 7. And I personally also, I connect with that. Some people don't because they're very set in the 3 meals, but I need to eat something at 5 and something substantial, and it continues up until 7 and then it tapers down. So please put maximum attention to that food because that planning needs to happen. And if you don't, then you're going to eat whatever is available or you're going to order it, which is unhealthy.
Correct.
So I tell the office goers to carry 2 tiffins. Simple.
Yeah.
Very simple. Planning hi to karna hai. And otherwise, just make sure you have a light lunch and your bigger meal at that time.
Correct.
So you can have a lunch which is just salad and vegetables or some sprouts or some soup or a fruit and then maybe have your bigger meal then. So
Correct.
Peak hunger time is very important. Having said that, if you miss that time and you have nothing else to eat, in a hour or two in your mealtime, you'll eat double. You'll eat much more when you're very hungry. That's what we see. That you come back and then with nothing, then you just kind of lose track.
Yeah.
So don't ignore this peak hunger time. And third is proteins, the big hero of today.
Yes.
It's become like a obsession with people and even with health professionals.
Right.
I don't think it's required. That obsession is not required. What is required is cutting back on carbs and focusing on proteins. But excessive protein can be harmful, detrimental, and also through protein powders, it can be really toxic. It can be highly pro-inflammatory. So, but at least 2 meals, if not 3, should be around proteins, not carbs. Right. I also use the word carbotarians. I think we are just having so much of carb and not having, we call ourselves vegetarians. So it's just, so focus become more protein centric and pair your proteins. That the the fourth P, that pair it with some vegetables or fruits ideally. Right. So if you're taking an egg or you're taking dal, or have some vegetables with it. Okay. So that increases the quotient of veggies and reduces the carbs. Right. And lastly is protective foods. Protective foods is, you would understand, in our language, it is all the foods which give you disease fighting benefits. All the polyphenols, the bioflavonoids, the brightly colored vegetables and fruits, the nuts and the seeds, the spices, the hydration, the probiotics and the prebiotics, which is food for the probiotics. So really everything that is what we call disease fighting, and these are not nutrients necessarily. These are the colors in the brightly colored fruits and vegetables, and have a rainbow diet. So what does this practically mean to the listening audience? It would mean maybe just one meal which is around these foods. Okay, so it could be a soup and a salad for dinner. It could be a sprout and a salad for lunch, or a breakfast of fruits and then maybe something with it. But 80% of these foods. Focus on getting some good spices in, some spice waters, some probiotics, some fiber, pretty much that. So I call these also in the protective food, the 3 Fs. Right. So fermented foods, polyphenols, the functional foods. Right. And of course, a fiber. So, these are very simple things, but these are gut friendly and they will help you dealing with several problems. So this was the closest I could pack.
Yeah. This is really good, actually. Yeah. It sums it up really well.
Yes. So your grains have to be planned. Your hunger times have to be planned. So personalized, it has to be personalized to you. So your peak hunger time has to be addressed, your personal choice of grains. And proteins is generic. Again, whatever you eat. Yeah, it could mean anything from lentils, pulses, rajma chana dal, to sprouts, to sattu, to nuts and seeds, to fish, chicken, eggs, or dairy. Yeah, so it is everything that works for you. And
but we don't have to do it in excess, like not required, not like excess.
No.
Trying to do like 2x of your body weight and all that people
no, that's not required unless you're doing competitive level of sports and you have that kind of requirement.
Otherwise not required. Okay. So keeping these 5 pillars.
This is in my book called Eating at Work.
Eating
at Work.
At work. Wow. Yeah, which is what is needed.
Yes.
Because we are at work.
All that have to make it concise.
Yeah. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I've written 5 books.
Yes.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to get more information about exactly, in detail, if they really want to get into your philosophy of eating and what is inflammation and how to correct it, then they can reach out to you.
Yes, absolutely. I first wrote my book when I was working with Escorts Heart Institute.
Okay.
And that was on cholesterol, but that's not available to the public right now. And then, of course, I wrote my book, which was published by Penguin. Okay. Is Wheat Killing You? Is Wheat Killing You? Yes. It was the first book of its kind in India addressing the problem of gluten sensitivity. But primarily at that time, we were dealing with celiac disease. It doesn't matter today whether it's celiac or not celiac. If you're just non-celiac gluten intolerant, the science remains the same in terms of elimination remains the same. And management doesn't change. Right. So that was that. And then after that, I wrote The Diet Doctor. Okay. So that was about metabolic disorders, insulin issues, etc. And that was also published by Penguin. And then we moved to this Eating at Work.
Yes.
And that was Simon Schuster, the publisher. And then the 4G Code to Good Health, again by Penguin. The 4Gs being gut, girth, gluten, and glucose.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So the 2 parts of the body which matter are your gut and your waist.
Yeah.
Which are basically connected with inflammation.
Yes.
And the 2 drivers of inflammation in our food include gluten and the grains and sugars. So the inflammation coming from high insulin and the foods, the grains.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what it is.
So loads of information.
Yes, easily available. They are available on Amazon.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, maybe we can reach out to these books and get the information from there. So when we're talking about, you have insisted a lot about microbiome and how everything kind of starts from the gut. So a lot of people think microbiome is something that takes time for you to rebuild your microbiome. So in your practice, like, what's your experience? How long actually can it take? Does it take that long to?
The science also is very clear that we can start shifting it within 2 days.
Within 2 days.
Yeah. And as we speak, I can give you an example of a woman who came to me with PCOS. She was on the pill for 3 years. And again, she had come for weight loss. And she didn't show up for 2 weeks for a follow-up. And when she came, I asked her, how was she? She said, ma'am, I didn't come because I got my period. And I said, really? And I smiled, and she said, why are you smiling? He said, something to do with the diet. And I said, what do you think it was due to? She said, I thought the pill is working. And I said, really? It didn't work for 3 years and it worked this week. Because for her weight loss, we had removed all the breads, the bakery products, and all the sweets, of course. And she was given the flour, which was a low glycemic flour, and it didn't have wheat. It had some other grains. And by default, it was just like,
wow,
like magic today, as fast as that.
People don't have to wait for months. But if
it takes complete changes, may take time, but it begins to give you functional benefits immediately.
Okay, amazing. So this is amazing that you can shift your microbiome really quickly. But because out there now, I have seen that a lot of people who are going to these functional nutritionists, and they're asking for getting variety of tests done if they have any gut issue, costing around 1 lakh or so, SIBO testing and this testing and that testing. तो ये इतना जरूरत है इन सब चीजों की कि हम बेसिक पे भी स्टिक करके रिजल्ट्स ले सकते हैं.
I think since we have the tools to document things which were not there earlier, today you have a full microbial, your whole poop can be studied with respect to populations which are there, which are missing, which are imbalanced. And then you have focused probiotics. So these are very new things which were not available earlier. Having said that, I don't think everyone is a candidate for these kind of tests because A, they're expensive.
Yeah.
And B, then to move to the next level, we have to be careful, be conservative.
Yeah.
We can't push these to everybody. And mostly we're able to manage patients with the routine tests and some antibody tests and some to document. To me, I tell the patient immediately. I said, look, I know what's going wrong with you. And I don't need any single test, but of course, certain assays are required. But these expensive tests are optional. You want to do them because a lot of people don't believe that these problems exist. Why are we doing this? But the doctor said, I'm not celiac. But the doctor said, why are you taking this? So then sometimes they are important to document to get psychological sort of satisfaction. And I also believe that certain amount of, what we can measure, we can manage better. Yeah, definitely there is room for that. But everyone is not a candidate for such expensive tests. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so last question, Shivam. There is, again, a lot of, because obviously...
Can I just add something to the last question? You can patch it in there. Yeah. There are some people who say, how do you know I have a leaky gut? So I said, get the test done then. Right. Because you haven't studied the science, I am sharing with you. But if you want to document, so we have tests for that. So we have many more tools, but we don't use the same tools for everybody.
Because you have the experience, and then you get, just from the symptoms, you can make unless there could be a leaky gut. Yeah. Okay. So Shivam, thank you so much. But just last question that right now in the day and age of social media, we also see a lot of buzzwords floating around all the time. So there is a lot of information that is floating right now on social media about perimenopause and menopause. Like almost a 35-year-old is very scared of perimenopause, and they're talking about, perimenopause hai, everything is going to finish at menopause and all. So it's like, is it a doomsday when you hit menopause, or is it a rebirth? And does everybody has to go through that dip in terms of the depression and mood swings and brain fog and hot flashes and things like that, or you actually can manage it really well and there is a good life beyond menopause as well?
Well, I think perimenopause is a time when your body tells you that start preparing
Hmm.
to change your lifestyle, start changing the way you're eating. And if you are prepared well in perimenopausal time, you don't have to fear anything.
Right.
And you can protect yourself from pretty much all the hormonal problems that come with, with the shift in hormones and imbalance, low estrogen and all of that. So you can prepare yourself very beautifully in perimenopause, for menopause and beyond, and life can be as good post menopause. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is what I wanted to hear from you, because absolutely, because the young, population is fearing menopause so much that it's just the end of fertility, end of everything. Your skin is.
Yes, fertility, of course, by not pharmacy fertility, and certainly quality of life, prevention of diseases, osteoporosis, and mental health issues, and other autoimmune problems, and so on and so forth. Everything can be.
Everything.
Yeah, you can prepare yourself and protect yourself.
Yeah. Okay, that's great to know. That's great. Yeah. But thank you so much, Ishi ma'am, for coming and giving us wealth of information. I'm very, very happy that, the audience will take away a lot of good information, specifically about women health, because generic space में तो हम बात करते ही हैं कि क्या खाना है, क्या नहीं खाना है, and there's a lot of information. But specific to women health, sometimes, that whole angle to that really helps as well as to, where the problem could be coming from. And again, focusing on your gut health is what you said is important. Working on your microbiome could be one thing that can really shift things for you. So thank you so much for all that information that you shared.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ishi ma'am.